Greetings, Rebel fans. My name is Jason Kelly. This is the Let's Run podcast. I want to welcome you all to the show today. It has been an eventful week for the UNLV football program and the Runnin Rebels. Lots to talk about, lots going on, and really just kind of a fun week for the Rebels. You know, we had our incredible bowl victory over Cal. If you missed my post-game show, after that, that was a really fun episode. A lot of great seniors we were able to say goodbye to with some really fun performances. You know, guys like Ricky White, Jackson Woodard, all-time Rebels leaving, made for a very interesting show. The day after we started, and more than I was expecting, you know, obviously with a coach leaving, you're going to have a lot of transfers, but we had a lot of really great young UNLV football players leave and announce their going into the transfer portal. Basically, you know, when Coach Odom was announcing that he was leaving, and even, you know, right after Dan Mullen was hired, basically every player on the team at least thought about entering the transfer portal. Every player on the team considered it heavily. All the players that had eligibility left probably thought about putting their name in the portal. And I know that there were a few players that put their name in the portal before the bowl game, but then wanted to play in the bowl game, and they were not allowed to. I think that was the case with Tony Grimes and Greg Burrell. I think they would have played in the bowl game had they been permitted to by the coaches, but the coaches didn't want players that were in the transfer portal to play in the bowl game, and I think that was a completely justified move. So we saw a lot of players you know, leave the Rebels. We have some players like Jalen Catalan, who announced that he was leaving the Rebels. That was a sad one. Tony Grimes, obviously, he had a year of did Grimes? So I didn't think Grimes played. I thought that Tony Grimes had been told that he couldn't play. So I guess I could just be wrong about that. So thanks. We had a bunch of players announce that they were staying or leaving. I wanted to go through the list of players that we had in the transfer portal, just so we could keep, you know, up to date on everybody. Devin Green, he left. He was a 3-star prospect. Didn't really get a ton of playing time at UNLV his freshman year. He committed to the University of Utah. Greg Burrell, Las Vegas kid, really good player. I was really disappointed to see him go. He ended up committing to Texas State. That was a big time get for Texas State. Don't know how I feel about him going to Texas State, but, you know, it is what it is. A couple of linemen left, Mason Vicari and Hank Purvis, who were both really solid players, got a ton of snaps. They both left and followed Barry Odom to Purdue. Pretty sad, pretty bummed about that. But I guess I'll continue with the players that left. Manny Powell, he put his name in the portal. Anton Ambuel, he put his name in the portal, big guy. Christian Moore, Corey Thompson, that was a name that we really didn't want to lose. He's a wide receiver. Will Thomas, Marshall Nichols, our punter, he's in the portal. Jalen Catalan, obviously. D'Angelo Irvin, he's in the portal, not a fun name to lose. Matthew Green, Damian McDaniel, who was kind of our 3-star wide receiver product, didn't get a ton of run this year, but he is in the transfer portal. Charles Correa, Max Mogelson, probably the name that most Rebels were pretty disappointed entered the transfer portal was Fisher Kamak, a defensive lineman out of Arizona. We don't really know where he's going to end up yet. He could end up in Purdue. He could end up at Arizona State. He was a guy that had been targeted under the Marcus Arroyo staff. Jalen St. John, he's a redshirt senior. He'll end up as an offensive tackle. I think he'll probably follow Barry to Purdue. Caden Chittenden, our kicker, a lot of rumors that he might end up at a place like USC. In terms of Michael Allen, he was earlier in the season. He's at the Marshall Thundering Herd. Looking through, I want to make sure I'm not missing any names. Looks like Matthew Sluka, our former quarterback, is going to end up at Memphis, which is an interesting spot for him, considering there's going to be a bit of a quarterback competition going on there. So let's talk about the guys that we have committed to the Rebels. First was a 3-star transfer, three-star recruit as well. Jalen Glover, he's a 5'7" running back from the University of Utah. A lot of talent there. There was some frustration uh, with the people. Um, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize that Grimes actually played in the bowl game. I thought that he had been not permitted to play because he had entered the portal. So my mistake there. Let's talk about the guys that we had into UNLV and in the transfer portal. Jalen Glover, running back, short guy, but really a lot of power. There were some people in Utah that were upset with Kyle Whittingham, Utah's coach, for not using Jalen Glover. Nick El Nick Elksness. He was a three-star tight end, had ties to Dan Mullen. He's from South Carolina. Very good player. Happy about that pickup. Trying to see who else we had added. It looks like those are, and then obviously the big one, which I'll get into in just a sec. But we've only had 3 transfers in so far. The biggest of which being our quarterback. I'm sure all of you guys are aware, but Anthony Colandrea, I don't know how he says his last name, but Anthony Colandrea was a quarterback from the University of Virginia. He was a Cavalier. Colandrea was rated as a three-star recruit coming out of high school. I believe he played in Lakewood in Florida. Commits to the University of Virginia. Didn't get a ton of playing time his freshman year, but in his sophomore year, he was basically the starter at a P5 program. I'm not 100% sure how what kind of terms he left the University of Virginia on, but at Virginia, he had kind of an uneven sophomore year. A lot of talent, a lot of big plays. I will do a film breakdown on him just so we can kind of see, just so I can kind of show Rebel fans what kind of talent he is. But really kind of an up and down year. Virginia ended up finishing 5-7 in the ACC. Colandrea threw for 2,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He only had a quarterback rating of 101st, but it was not a Virginia team that had a ton of depth. In fact, they kind of struggled a little bit. There were some injury concerns, and Colandrea, probably his worst game of the year was a brutal game at Notre Dame, where he threw for 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. 35-14. Did not end the year great. They also played at SMU, where I believe he finished with 1 touchdown, 18 of 27. So not a bad performance from him there. They lost at Virginia Tech. They lost kind of 3 straight games to end the year, and by the end of the year, he had been replaced with Musket, but there was an injury issue going on there. The backup quarterback had replaced him. Probably his best game of the year came against. So it wasn't against Virginia. Did beat a ranked Pitt team. That was pretty good. He had a pretty good game against Virginia where he threw for 200 yards and a touchdown. But the guy's the gunslinger. His first game of the year against Richmond, he was 17 of 23, 297 yards, 2 touchdowns. Colandrea is a gunslinger. He's not very big. He's listed at 6 foot on ESPN. I've seen him listed as low as 5'10". He's probably about an inch taller than Boise State's quarterback, Maddox Madsen. But going through his film, you see a guy with supreme arm strength, something that I don't think that Hodge Malik Williams really had. I remember when I did film review on Hodge Malik Williams, I was a little underwhelmed by his arm strength, and I think that he definitely had a better arm than I gave him credit for, but it wasn't very accurate, and I think he struggled with distance control. Colandrea, on the other hand, he's an absolute gunslinger. I mean, the guy can make every throw. Which is pretty nice. He's mobile. Colandrea ran for, I don't know how many yards he had on the year. Let's see. I'm not sure. Seems like he had rushing yards, about 500 or 600 yards on the year. Pretty good. And in the previous year, I mean, he had 13 touchdowns in 2023. His freshman year, he had 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. it just didn't seem to really work out for him at the University of Virginia. But you know, I've seen some Rebel fans, and I myself have looked at his physical profile, his statistics, his QB rating, and maybe felt like they didn't quite understand why people believed that this quarterback get was such a big deal. Because I do believe he is coming in to be the starter. Although I think that Coach Mullen would be wise to bring in another quarterback for a legit quarterback competition. Um, we have Gail Ochoa on the roster still. He's a young quarterback. I don't know if he's ready to contend, for a starting job. But you probably want Colin Drea to come into UNLV and really have to earn his spot and have a competent backup. This is where a guy like Cam Friel, say what you want about Cam Friel, he was a valuable part of the team. Um, he didn't have a huge upside, didn't have a ton of talent. However, Cam Friel was kind of a backbone and a locker room guy, and a guy that, sure, the team might not be as good with him, but that he can do the job. Um, and I think that the Rebels are going to be in kind of a tough position, given that that's not on the team guaranteed anymore like it was last year. So what I would say is teams like Syracuse and Ole Miss were all over this guy, Colin Drea. Ole Miss was recruiting him heavily. The Rebels beat out a top 15 SEC team for the services of this kid. If that doesn't tell you something about him, then I don't know what would. Syracuse also, they were losing Kyle McCord, their quarterback that we firsthand saw absolutely slice and dice the Rebels. And Syracuse was hard after him too. And yet he saw Dan Mullen, he saw Las Vegas, he saw that dome, and he said, I can do good there. And so if you are skeptical of Colin Drea, I don't blame you. However, I would just take into account that Dan Mullen has a long and storied career of working with quarterbacks and getting the best out of them. Colin Drea is a great talent. He's got a great arm, great feel for the game. He's mobile. He's not a statue. He can make every throw in the book. And Dan Mullen is the perfect guy to get the most out of him. And so I do think that this is a slam dunk get at the quarterback position. I think he's going to be great. I have no doubt that Dan Mullen's going to be able to extract every ounce of talent that he has out of him. And yeah, so I think it's a great get. I think it's a great pickup. I think Rebel fans should be excited about it. And if you're not excited about it, go watch his highlights. He's got an awesome highlight reel where you see that, he was on a Virginia team that just didn't have a ton going for it. And yet he took that team and made it the best. I think he did just about the best he could as a young player. He's coming in with experience. He's got 20 games in a power conference as a starter. That's something, say what you want about Matthew Sluka or Hodge Malik Williams. Those guys have been playing in the SES and the FCS level. So great get. I think he will be the day one starter. I'm hoping that a guy like Gail Ochoa or somebody else that Dan Mullen brings in can add a little bit of competition to this quarterback room. But all credit to Dan. Besides Colin Drea and the tight end, the biggest area of need for the UNLV football team right now in the transfer portal, it's on the lines. It's in the trenches. It's the offensive and defensive tackles. The transfer portal has absolutely decimated both of our lines, and we haven't really gotten players to fill in those spots yet. The DBs, the linebackers, the corners, the safeties. We will find guys that are competent at those positions. What worries me most is offensive and defensive lines. Now, Mullen has a lot of connections with SEC teams. Some of them are just finishing up their bowl games. There's still plenty of players in the portal for Mullen to go in and develop. There's also a few players that are staying behind, that haven't followed Odom. I wouldn't expect too many more Rebels to be jumping out into the transfer portal than have already. I think if they were going to go, most of them have already jumped in. Although there could be a surprise or two. Don't get me wrong. But over the next week, look for offensive and defensive line commits. That's really where the Rebels are in their biggest area of need at the moment. Lots to do for this staff. And, we had the offensive line coach. I can't remember his name. One sec. I'm just pulling this up. I want to make sure I get the name right. So UNLV has its new offensive line coach, and it's a guy named Mike Solen. He has previously worked under Dan Mullen at the University of Florida, and he had been on Ohio State staff. Probably a pretty good get. Don't know much about him, but he's got experience with Mullen, and I can imagine that he will be able to help us recruit better players. You have to understand that Mullen is still kind of piecing together his staff. There's been a lot of offers to players. Again, even the offers, just because a player hasn't posted an offer from UNLV doesn't mean that those players haven't received offers. We didn't see Colandrea talk about, UNLV offer. So there are plenty of players, besides the ones that we have seen on Twitter that have received phone calls from the Rebels and recruiting offers. We also know that the Rebels are, the defensive staff is kind of the big question mark for me at this point. There was a rumor that Zach Arnett was going to be our new defensive coordinator. That hasn't been announced yet or finalized, but I would expect the news this week to be fast and furious regarding and this is also true, and this is something Mullen said on Colin Cowherd's show, and I believe in a couple other places, that people are reaching out to him to bring players. I think that this is, under Mullen. Mullen has all the media connections in the world. UNLV's television slate will probably be pretty good next year. I think players will see UNLV as a good place to get exposure, whether that be to, jump to the NFL or to, move up to a bigger school after this year. I don't think Mullen's going to have a problem filling out his roster. But this week's big. We need news, and we have to kind of expect that. We have to kind of hope that Mullen and Mullen knows what he's doing. That's the other thing. Mullen coached 100+ games in the SEC. The guy knows what he's doing. So I have a little doubt that it's going to be okay. And Rebel fans, I get that there's a little bit of anxiety going on as you're seeing guys follow Barry Odom to Purdue. You're seeing players transfer out by a lot. And what I would say is, players like to be recruited. It's fun to be wanted. A lot of people like having job interviews a lot more than having jobs, because it's fun to be kind of wined and dined and have people come in and tell you their vision. And so there might, we did have a Rebel, Anthony Rosas, I believe, who had entered the transfer portal that recommitted to UNLV. And Jet Thomas, Jet Thomas seriously spun. I can tell you this. I wouldn't call this insider information, but Jet Thomas, our star running back, he seriously considered entering the transfer portal after it was clear that Barry was gone. So you have to understand that, transfer portal, it's just part of the game. It'll be okay. Dan Mullen knows what he's doing. We can trust him. I promise. And the news is going to be fast and furious this week. So there's a lot of great accounts on UNLV Twitter that are posting kind of the news and checking on it. I do that a little bit, but I want the commentary to kind of be my thing as a channel. I'm not a newsbreaker. I just kind of give my opinions on what's happening. And so expect a full breakdown of our quarterback this week. I'll do video. I'll do Twitter clips. I'll do it all. Maybe I'll do it on Christmas Day when I'm bored, because Christmas afternoon is always kind of a boring. It's not my favorite day of the year. Once Christmas morning's over, it always kind of feels like, oh, okay, well, I guess we did it. It's kind of, I wouldn't say anticlimactic, but Christmas afternoon's kind of a boring day sometimes. So that's probably when I'll do it. So any other Rebels that could be coming back, I'm not 100% sure at this time. I would not expect guys like Tony Grimes or Jalen Catalon to end up back at UNLV. I think you could see some younger players who put their name out there in the transfer portal and maybe just didn't quite like what they see. I don't think Dan Mullen's going to be the kind of guy that if players enter the transfer portal and then decide that they don't want to be in the transfer portal anymore. I don't think Dan Mullen's going to like cut them or anything. Because, as he said, he likes the foundation that Barry Odom built, and as much of that foundation as he can maintain in place, he's going to want to maintain in place. And the last thing that I'll say is, and this is a point that's been brought up by a lot of people on Twitter, so it's not my thought originally, but Barry Odom was replacing 50 people basically every time in both years. After his first year, at the start of his first year, and at the start of his second year. Turnover is not a new thing. You're going to see some new names. You're going to see a bunch of names you've never heard of, and it's okay. It's okay that we lost a lot of guys. We're going to get a lot of guys, and just take a deep breath and kind of wait for the news to roll in. And also, there is another transfer portal window. There are also times in the spring where guys could join after spring practice if they don't think that they're going to end up in a favorable spot on the depth chart. And yeah, this is another great point from Master Rebel. There are members of Dan Mullen's staff that are still coaching. There are guys that I imagine is kind of poaching from bigger programs, lower level members from bigger programs. And so that's probably also the holdup of why we haven't heard some of his staff information. And that's actually the case for a lot of jobs that for coaches that have just been hired. Barry Odom, his staff isn't completely filled out yet. Neither is New Mexico's or Washington State's, or, it's okay. It's going to take some time. And this isn't the only window for a transfer portal either. There is another window for a transfer portal. So the most important things to nail down right now, the most important one is quarterback. And we have that nailed down. Hopefully we add another name, but anyway, that's basically all for football that I wanted to jump into. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Runnin Rebels, our basketball team. The Runnin Rebels beat UC Riverside yesterday, 66-53. It was genuinely, I thought it was probably our best performance of the season. And, the first half was pretty rough. The Rebels were winning by just a little bit. The game was closer than comfortable. We didn't hit a three in the first half. I thought that DJ didn't look great. Bear didn't really look very good. Obviously, guys like Julian Rishwain and Brooklyn Hicks. I mean, nobody really looked good in that first half against UC Riverside. The rebounding continues to be an issue for the Runnin' Rebels, as teams have kind of been able to bully them down low. Missing a guy like Rob Whaley, that hurts a lot. But regardless, even if Rob Whaley was playing, there would still be issues with the rebounding for the Runnin' Rebels. And so that's kind of the thing that I'll say. The Runnin' Rebels have a pretty favorable stretch of games here. In KenPom, we're up to 102, so that win actually did help us KenPom rating-wise. If you weren't aware, that UC Riverside team took BYU in Provo to a pretty tight game, 86-80. They went on the road and won in overtime at Colorado State, a team who just beat the University of Reno in Reno. We want to thank Colorado State for that. And so, that UC Riverside team wasn't bad. They did have size, and the size did give the Rebels some issues. And, looking at the Rebels schedule, their next game is this Saturday against Fresno State. That's a home game. KenPom has that as an 80-66 victory for the Rebels right now. So it's going to be important for the Rebels to really kind of buckle down and win that game convincingly. KenPom is a team that I was expecting a lot. Sorry, Fresno is a team that I was expecting a lot more of on the year. Zayon Collins, our friend who was committed to the Runnin' Rebels, hasn't been quite as effective for them as I hoped that he would. But looking at these next games, it goes Fresno State, Air Force, and then San Jose State. 3 conference games, all of which the Rebels have to win and win convincingly. The Air Force game is on the road in Colorado Springs, so that's going to be, going to Air Force is always a little harder than you think it's going to be. Air Force is kind of weird. Most games in Mountain West play, they struggle. They're not great. But every once in a while, last year they beat UNLV by 32 at the Thomas and Mack Center, and they beat New Mexico at New Mexico. And I think those were the only two games that Air Force won in conference play last year. So Air Force can randomly, if they're hitting threes, give you a really tough game, and the Rebels are going to have to be focused on that. And then San Jose State, who, credit to Tim Miles, he has really San Jose State started out the year really rough, but they've kind of turned it on with some pretty impressive wins. They gave New Mexico a really tough game at the pit. They beat UTEP, Long Beach State. They've been on a good little roll. So San Jose State isn't a pushover team either. So the Rebels have to go. The Runnin Rebels have to go 3-0 in their next stretch. They have to focus on rebounding. They have to make a judgment call on if Rob Whaley is going to play the rest of the year. Rob Whaley has been dealing with this lower back issue all in the non-conference play. He played the first 2 games of the year and then has sat out since then. The team has been severely hindered in terms of its inside presence, kind of the vision of a Bear Cherry Rob Whaley front court physically dominating teams has not come to fruition because Rob hasn't played. And Bear Cherry still is not 100% healthy either. He's dealing with foot and ankle. I'm not 100% sure what's going on with Bear, but I think it's a foot issue, but not 100% on that one. And so 3-0 in these next 3 games is absolutely huge. It's massive because then UNLV is going to have a really difficult stretch. They're going to play at Boise State. That's a game where Boise State's 57 in KenPom right now. Then they play at Colorado State. That's a game where Colorado State just is coming off their biggest win of the year. And then Utah State and San Diego State back-to-back. So they're going to have to be 3-0. And then they're going to have to win, 2 of those 4 games against Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, and San Diego State. That's what it's going to take for the Rebels to be competitive. After that, the schedule gets a little easier. You get, Wyoming, New Mexico. But the Mountain West this year, it's interesting. Utah State went on the road tonight and got a very good win at St. Mary's. Boise State also beat St. Mary's. But the Mountain West this year, it's good. It's certainly better than it was in a year like 2017 or 2018. But the Mountain West isn't great this year. In fact, it's kind of mediocre is probably the word in comparison to previous years that I would use. Reno, with that loss to Colorado State, is almost assuredly out of NCAA tournament contention as an at-large. It's going to be really difficult for them with losses at Loyola Marymount, losses to Vanderbilt and Washington State. Too many losses in the non-conference for Reno to make the tournament. New Mexico is a team that is probably out off the bubble at the moment. They have losses to they have a terrible loss to New Mexico State at home. That's a team that the Runnin Rebels beat. They lost to St. John's. They lost to Arizona State. They have a couple of good wins, but really New Mexico is squarely on the bubble at the moment. San Diego State is, of course, San Diego State's defense this year is pretty remarkable. I don't think I've ever seen San Diego State play defense this well. And if you've ever paid attention to San Diego State kind of as a program, you'd understand that that's just an insane thing to say, but it's true. I watched San Diego State destroy Cal 71-50 last night, and that San Diego State team is absolutely disgusting. They're going to be a tough out in basically every game that we play them. I don't know that the Rebels are going to be able to get a game off of San Diego State this year. So the Mountain West it's not very good, but it's still dangerous. There are still 7 teams or 6 teams that can beat you on any given night, and even the lower level teams in the bottom 3 can get you too. And so what I would tell the Runnin Rebels at this time is really to hone in on defense. DJ has not been kind of the superstar that we were hoping that he would be this year. Now, DJ has been awesome. I don't say that to speak negatively of DJ whatsoever, because DJ has been the main reason we've been in these games. Obviously DJ is our best player. He deserves respect. But, I saw Donovan Dent, the point guard for New Mexico, go for 40 points at the pit. And I thought to myself, last year, if you would have told me, who do you want, New Mexico's point guard Donovan Dent or DJ Thomas? I would have said, oh, DJ Thomas 10 times out of 10. But could DJ have a 40-point game like Donovan Dent just did? I really don't think so. He's a little small, and he's not an elite athlete, but he is a good athlete. And he hasn't elevated, to that superstar of college basketball level this year. Now, he still could. There's still time in the year. He could just have had a kind of a rough start to the season. But DJ Thomas has a lot of work to do. Has a lot of work to do if he wants to, be kind of a first team Mountain West guy this year. I think that's going to be it's going to be a tall task this year because there's a lot of good point guards in the Mountain West. And we're going to have to see, if UNLV is going to contend in the Mountain West, DJ Thomas is going to have to be, better. You're going to have to see guys like Jaden Henley. I think Jaden Henley has been probably the best thing I've seen the last few games for the Runnin Rebels. Henley has been fine. He's been okay on defense, not as bad as he was to start the year. And his offense has been a little more consistent and a little more focused. I've liked what I've seen out of Henley, even though it's still unfortunate that he's really our only wing. Henley being back has been a definite positive for the Runnin Rebels. And then the last thing is Bear Cherry's got to be better. Bear Cherry is still struggling mightily with double teams in the post. Bear Cherry has his efficiency has cratered basically since that first 4-game stretch for the Runnin Rebels. A lot of work to do there. A lot of work. So expect the next games to be kind of get right games to amp up for conference play. And then we're going to see what this team can do. Like I said, if this year doesn't go well, and by well, I mean make the NCAA tournament kind of well, we could very well have a new coaching staff next year. And so Kevin Kruger, the stakes are clear. The stakes are clear. That's what I'll say. There's no mystery around the UNLV basketball program right now, which is something that I'm happy about. I think that this team could have a chip on its shoulder. Literally no one believes in this basketball team. A lot of Runnin' Rebel fans don't believe in this basketball team, and honestly for good reason. But that means that they have nothing to lose, this team. They can go out there with a chip on their shoulder and play well. And I'm excited to be at the Thomas and Mack and to cheer them on. And I hope that we get more people out to the Thomas and Mack because it's a historic venue, and I love going there, and I love seeing the guys play, regardless of whether it's Marvin Menzies coaching the team or Kevin Kruger or Lon Kruger. Still love the guys. So big week ahead. Hopefully the guys can get healthy. Hopefully we'll know with some clarity what's going on with Rob Whaley. And there's some players on this basketball team that I like. I like watching Julian Rishwing. I love watching DJ Thomas. And so look for the positives and kind of have fun because, football's taking all the headlines right now, and rightly so. We just hired maybe the best hire in the history of G5 football and Dan Mullen, just in terms of name recognition and resume. So let's just enjoy basketball while we have it because football is going to be there. Dan Mullen's going to put together a good program. And, we have a year of if we don't do well in basketball, we know what's going to happen. We know we're going to have a new coaching staff next year. And honestly, I do want to say publicly that the best scenario for UNLV basketball is Kevin Kruger having a miraculous conference season and winning the conference tournament and going to the NCAA tournament. That's what I'm rooting for. I want the program to succeed. I want Kevin to succeed so long as he is the Runnin' Rebel head coach. I do. And I think that the Mountain West is kind of open this year. Besides San Diego State, there isn't a team that we can't beat. So let's root for our guys to go do it. I hope they can. There's some good men and good players. There's good guys on that coaching staff. There are good players on the team. And they have my full public and private support. So thank you guys for checking out the Let's Run podcast on a Sunday night. I appreciate you all. Please have a good night. Please have a Merry Christmas. Spend lots of time with your families. Tell the people that you love them. And let's run.